good.
Oh, okay, cool.
Incredible.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick little. I got. Look, check it out.
Yeah.
I wrote a quick little script, so I got a.
Oh, incredible! Look at you. I love that.
That's my
Your
cheat sheet
mini
right
teleprompter.
there.
Yeah, I love it.
It's a $30 monitor on it.
Was it really? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I do need to switch it to the live stream.
Oh shoot.
In just 1 second.
Go ahead.
It's perfect. Thank you so much.
And it's recording right now.
No, that's great. Thank you.
It's recording locally and it's streaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook.
Okay.
Anything I can spoil here for? Let me know.
Okay, incredible. Yeah, if you have any questions you want to start us off
I just
with,
gotta get my
I'm just going to do 10
script.
minutes of
Yeah.
background and
Scripted,
stuff and
guys.
what's happened in the company, how
Yeah.
we think about what Cursor is, and then
Yeah.
mostly wanted to be interactive with the whole group and stuff. And just have it be a conversation.
All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. I hope you all had a really wonderful holiday season. I'm Chris Eischen, the director here at the Toledo Tech Loft. It's really an honor to see the amount of people that are here tonight. So thank you. And would you give everybody a round of applause? Like let's go. It's the day after Christmas and we got a packed house here. And I couldn't be more excited for this community that we've been growing. I briefly want to acknowledge a few of our partners. I have a little teleprompter going to keep reminding me of what I'm supposed to be saying versus what I normally say. But I want to say thanks to Dave Ball. He is the owner of the building, and from day one, he has donated this place so that we can have these types of events and grow this community. And so when you look at the growth in the tech scene in Toledo today, it's a lot of that has to do with the work that's being done here at the Toledo Tech Loft. And so thanks to him, we have a lot of things happening going into the new year. We got certification programs with CompTIA that we're going to be launching. So if you want to get AI certified and have like actual credentials for that, we're going to have that going on here. The other thing I want to mention is Buckeye Broadband. They've been a great partner of ours. They've provided our internet. They brought in fiber internet into the building, like dug the channels and everything and did all the work to make that happen. And they provide us with really great connectivity. So I want to thank them for what they do to make all of this stuff possible, right? Because if we weren't connected to the internet, we wouldn't be streaming this live right now. So pretty cool stuff. But the other thing I want to mention is membership. Membership helps keep the Tech Loft alive, and it also puts you right in line with all of the things happening in the Toledo area around tech. So you're right in the community. So if you're looking to get into it, look around. There might be somebody right here in the room that could be your next boss or your next co-founder. So that's what this community brings. And so with that, I'm done with my shameless plugs. I want to, I'm really honored to have this guy here. He's a Toledo native that has had just an amazing journey, and he's going to come here to share it with us. Welcome home, the COO of Cursor and AnySphere, Jordan Topoleski.
Thanks so much.
A little long-winded, but got it out.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out here. Really appreciate you having me here. Excited to be home for the holiday break. As mentioned, my name is Jordan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Cursor, and I'm a native of Toledo, Ohio. Born and raised here. Went to Sylvania Southview for high school before making my way over to the East Coast for a while. And today I want to spend time sharing a little bit more of what the whole Cursor journey has looked like up to now, how the company got started, how we've experienced some of the last few years of the company's growth, ultimately what we're trying to do as an organization longer term, but really want to keep the large majority of today for question and answer and have a discussion with you all, members of the community here, on what the future of software is going to look like. It feels like we're in such this interesting moment for the entire world right now. One of the biggest transformational moments I think we've seen in technology's history. I'm excited to open up a little bit of discussion around that. As mentioned, grew up here in Toledo, moved to Sylvania, and went to high school there. And when I went off to college, I always thought that I was actually going to go into civil service of some degree. My dad's was a librarian my whole childhood, and my mom was a a preschool teacher, and I think really got a love of learning from them. And when I went off to college, started to study some version of political science. But the story of how I got into the world of technology actually began with this platform called Upwork, which some of you may have heard of. It's this freelancing platform. Classic broke college kid trying to figure out how to make some money. And the options could be go to the library and you could like scan the cards for people. You could work at the campus gym. I actually decided I could go on this platform and experience this really interesting feeling, which was to work for yourself to a degree. There were all these listings on there, and as I scrolled through it, one of the more interesting ones was to actually build websites for people. I'd never built a website before, but this was a time in an era where there are a lot of these early web builder tools, things like Wix and WordPress and Squarespace and these type of organizations where you could easily put together websites for companies out there. And I started to do this more and more. There's actually a friend from college that I got together with, and we started to do this a lot more for organizations. And as we went into that summer of my freshman year of college and beyond, we actually started to do this much more. We went off of the Upwork platform, started talking to different companies, and we actually turned it into this full-time web development organization where we would work with a lot of companies, many here in the Midwest, thinking about how we could build them better versions of their website, enabling them through the power of technology. Started to work on that more and more to the degree where I actually decided to take a leave from college and work on it full time. And we built that company up to about 15 or 20 people all throughout the US, where we were building with a lot of these customers, and eventually had the opportunity to actually sell the company to an organization based out of Detroit. And at that point, I had really been bit by the technology bug to a degree. I think part of it was experiencing what it felt like to work for yourself a little bit. But part of it also came from what it felt like to deliver value to a lot of these companies that we worked with. Now, I will say we were working with a lot of these organizations that I would call more of SMBs. These organizations that were manufacturing companies, healthcare companies, work with some universities even that were out there. But there was one client I remember that particularly changed my mind on what I wanted to work on out there in the world. And it was this startup that had gone through the famous Y Combinator incubator program. And they'd went out and they'd raised several million dollars of funding. And we had a conversation with them to kind of help them build some of their stuff. And it was kind of a mind-blowing conversation for me because we'd work with some of these organizations. And you finally go to this org, and it's a couple of guys. They'd founded the company a year and a half ago. And we were so, almost want to say like stressed for the call. They'd raised millions of dollars. They're in the prestigious Y Combinator. And we hop on the phone with them. Go, to be honest with you, we pivoted the company 3 weeks ago. We have a prototype, have a little bit of an idea here. This was mind-blowing to me. It was crazy that these guys had raised a couple $1 million to build an idea of their own. My version of what technology was always much more rooted in what it looked like to enable organizations where this wasn't their main line of business. And for these guys, they're taking this really ambitious journey on trying to see how they could build maybe a bigger type of organization based in Silicon Valley. That was really my first exposure to Silicon Valley and the whole startup scene. And after we had worked with them a little bit, I'd been bit by the bug, and I knew that was something that I had to experience for myself, some form of leverage to understand what it looked like to work on some of these pretty crazy ideas. So I ended up moving out to San Francisco, where I've been the last 6 or 7 years now, and work on a series of my own startups. Worked on a project in the fintech space for a while, tried out a few different ideas, but the Cursor journey really begins with some folks that I had known of through college, some of the best engineers that I had ever known. And to start a little bit of the Cursor journey story, Cursor started at this really interesting moment in the world where GPT-3 from OpenAI had come out. And it was this first real inkling of AI being incredibly powerful. Still buggy. It wasn't quick. It hallucinated a lot. But you start to have this inkling of maybe this could be a new era of technology to a degree. And early on in the company's journey, it's actually a combination of multiple different ideas, not actually in the coding space that were being worked on. And as the space progressed more and more, there was actually a product that came out in the space as a little bit more of a first mover called GitHub Copilot, created by Microsoft. Microsoft, has always been the maintainers of VS Code, which is the code editor used by 70% or so of the world's developers. And they had this idea of trying to bring AI inside of the code editor to reimagine what that experience could look like. And it's exactly what they did. They built this extension that lives on top of your editor to try and accelerate the way that code is written. Now, that had been out there in the world for maybe 5 or 6 months at this point. And as it was out there in the world, we tried it, and a lot of the early team at Cursor tried it. We're pretty impressed by it. It's pretty cool to start to bring some of these capabilities more and more inside of the code editor. And as the fundamental underlying AI technology also got better and better, GPT 3.5, I think, was a really big moment where these models started to become far more usable than they'd been in the past. It's pretty magical. But as we talked to more and more organizations, we kept hearing some of the same thing, which was, it was good, but not great. And this is really the founding insight of Cursor. It was, everyone at the time was presuming that the code editor of the past, 10, 15 years ago, was going to be the right foundation for the future. That people were going to take the editor and kind of slap AI on top of it vis-a-vis an extension. Some big upsides of an extension, very easy to get started, ubiquitous concept for a lot of people that are already using different extensions. But the downside in our mind was that presumed, again, that the editor of 10 or 15 years ago was going to be the right foundation for 10 years into the future. And that was something we didn't agree with. We thought that in order to build something that was going to be as transformational as we thought this whole moment of AI was going to be, we had to build an editor of our own. So the first thing that Cursor did was we went out and actually forked VS Code, open source piece of software that editor used by about 70% of the world's developers, and started to build from the bottom up, with the real idea fundamentally being, how do you increase the surface area of where AI actually has an impact? The idea there being, it's really about finding all of these different areas where if you go and use a code editor, using AI is almost unavoidable, to the degree where if you're coding 5 hours a day, you should use AI 5 hours a day. It shouldn't be this optional experience we have it in different areas. It's going to change the way that software is written. We have to actually embody that over time. And this was the first piece that really started to work. This is the first piece that started to say, hey, what if you could actually control some of those UI pieces, some of the interface type experiences to actually give someone this amazing, fluid experience that developers would love. So this is the first piece. It was hacky at the beginning. A lot of 2023, I don't even know that it fully worked for a lot of folks. But as a lot of this progress started to happen more and more, people started to really feel the magic of that embedded experience. Starting with Cursor Tab. Cursor Tab was this idea of a next generation autocomplete. Now, this was structurally built differently than something like Gmail autocomplete. It was actually built with an underlying model using this technology called next edit prediction or next action prediction. And what this was doing is it was actually looking at all of the edits that you made in your code base over the last 10 or 15 minutes and using all of that in a context window of an LLM to predict your next edit. So even early on, this wasn't just called Cursor Tab, it was called Cursor Tab, 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 because the idea was you could actually press tab multiple times in a row and it would have learned or almost like warmed up on so much of your experience up to then that you could really have it be pretty substantial in the code that it was writing. Now, the second concept that we also had in mind was being really clear of who we were building the product for. This first piece was all about increasing the surface area, is more of a quantity type play. The second piece for us was quality. There was a whole spectrum of folks that I think you could build for out there. And even today, there's been an explosion of tooling in this space. We always position Cursor to be further down the spectrum, as in building for more of a professional audience. And always saying, we wanted to build for the professional engineer. Maybe a better way to put it is build for the hardest problems. We really had this belief that if you could conquer kind of more of the difficult pieces of software engineering, you could always go downstream and figure out a lot of the other pieces. It's a lot harder to start from the other direction and approach the harder problems over time. So because of that, it meant Cursor wasn't just about generating net new code from scratch. It was equally as about editing and deleting existing code. And probably more importantly, it had to do a really good job at working inside of very large code bases and understanding the existing patterns of software that were already out there when you were working on a project. So the second piece that was really foundational to the product was anytime you pull a file, folder, or project into Cursor, we were actually basically running an embedding model or a series of indexing. Basically, the way to think about it is turning all of this large, big code base that you're working in into a more understandable series or almost a mapping of your code base. such that instead of when you ask the model a question, it goes directly from your question to the LLM and serves that back to you. We introduced this intermediate step where it's actually pulling all of that relevant context from all around your code base and actually making sure that that was included as part of the prompt. So that when it went to an LLM and came back to you, it was much more accurate and the quality of the code could be a lot higher than it was in the past. What we saw for a lot of these organizations was that when you combined a lot of this quantity-based piece, increasing the surface area of where you could have an impact, with the quality piece, a deep understanding of a code base, you got this pretty magical experience at the middle. And what we've seen is that play out. So Cursor went again from 2023, 2024, come into that year with the first 10,000 users or so. And 2024 is this year where we introduced the agent product. And the agent product was this idea. It's really what Cursor is more known for today, where you can use human language to describe what you want. Hey, help me create an API endpoint, to retrieve invoice information. Click enter, and it actually will write and implement that code inside of a code base for you. And saw a massive takeoff, where basically over the course of the year, the company goes from about $1 million of ARR, annual recurring revenue to start the year, to over 100 million to end the year. And really, as part of that journey, we also saw the user base explode and start to discover all of these new use cases. Ultimately, when I think about what the Cursor vision is, we've always said that our goal as a company is to think about how we can automate coding or automate the creation of software. Now, our approach to that's maybe been a little opinionated. Sometimes that word automation can almost be a little bit scary, but we think about it differently. We think about it such that people probably far overestimate how quickly we'll get to 100% automation, but probably also underestimate how quickly we can get to 80%. And if that's the case, how quickly can we get to a point where so much of the rote toil, the manual work that software engineers are working on, can be increasingly automated to help engineers focus on that last 20%? I think people are going to continue to be extremely valuable for a long time. Almost one way I like to think about it is the what versus the how. I think the average software engineer today spends so much of their time on the how. How do I implement this? How should I think about putting it into practice? When in reality, the value comes from the what. What should I be doing? What is the business context that I want to pull into this? And at Cursor, we're really thinking about how we help people move from the how to the what to do some of these type of things. And as we came into 2025, there was this next part of the journey, which was also thinking about how we go more horizontal along the way. So at this point, you remember the quality piece and the quantity piece, thinking about going from Cursor tab to the agent. This next evolution was thinking about also not just serving the individual developers. In fact, if you go to the end of 2024, the large majority of our user base was individual developers using the product almost on a credit card. As we went into 2025, we also wanted to really serve some of these large organizations. We went out there and said, how do we think about the Fortune 500 or the Global 2000 companies, also giving them a great experience? And so much of this year has been focused exactly on that. Thinking about how to be more enterprise ready and serve some of these large organizations. Thinking about this interesting organizational piece, which we can talk about a little bit today, of going from an org that was mostly all developers to building out also an equally strong go-to-market part of the organization and really serving these large organizations. And also thinking about evolving the product roadmap, where ultimately, in order to think about automating software, it's not just about writing the code. It's about the whole software development lifecycle: plan, design, write, review, test, deploy. How do we think about Cursor ultimately playing across this spectrum more and more over time? And today, what we see is quite a bit of adoption from these organizations. So Cursor went from this tool that at the beginning of 2024 had tens of thousands of users to today, millions of people all around the world using Cursor. About 75% of the Fortune 500 organizations use Cursor to write their code, including some of these large companies like NVIDIA and Salesforce and Shopify, and organizations where there are tens of thousands of engineers also using the product every single day. It's introduced this whole new paradigm for us of trying to understand how to best serve these companies and give them an incredible experience and enable large-scale developer organizations to also get a lot of value out of the tool. So I think we sit at this really interesting point, and it's kind of where I want to open the discussion for us today. Try to give a little bit of an overview so we have a lot of surface area to tap into for our discussion. But one area to start is just thinking about this really interesting moment that we're in right now, where I think if you go back 18 months ago, 24 months ago, when a lot of this tooling for the first time felt like it was actually starting to be valuable, it's I think, gotten to a place where it's achieved real product market fit, proven real value for these organizations. And we're just at this beginning of an acceleration curve where what it means to be a software developer, what it means to write code, I think is going to change in a way that's faster than almost any technology moment that we've seen in the past, and just feels like it will truly be one of these step function type moments. And we're really excited at Cursor to kind of be on that journey of figuring out what that means for our company, what that means for the world, and what that means for the future of software. So very excited to have a little bit of conversation here. And we want to really treat the remainder of the session as Q&A. And there are obviously a lot of different themes we can talk about: the future of software, how we've built Cursor both as a product and as a company. We'd love to also hear from your experiences using the product. And now, even just through the introductions, had chatted with several of you in the crowd that have used the product quite a bit, and take it from there. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand. I think maybe we have a
I have a mic,
over
so
here.
if you have questions or anything, I'll start. You just point me where you want me to go, and I'll right here.
I'm Dylan Shears with Share Viral Corporation. When you think about, like, you said something very interesting, differentiating between the how and the what, right? And as enterprises now adapt and move more into utilizing like tools like Cursor for experimenting in AI and product development to more serious workflows like engineering workflows, where do you see the biggest gaps are as far as adoption? And then, like, even when you think about moving from product development more to like these enterprise level companies having more of a demand for measurable revenue impact, like, where do you see, or where do you envision Cursor ending up there? And then how does that tie as well to like the creator economy? I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, a few different pieces we can talk about. Talk a little bit about how the product has evolved to think about serving these large organizations. Talk a little bit about measuring their ROI, and then maybe hit on that last piece as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I mean, it was this interesting moment coming into 2025 where, again, pretty much all of our adoption at that point had come from individuals. And even though there was a serious chunk of our revenue coming from teams, even those teams had always been self-serve. So we always asked the question, like, how can we as an organization have value add to these companies? It made sense when it's 10, 15, 20 people. But if we want to do a large scale deployment, talk about tens of thousands of people using a product, probably had to think about enabling them in a different way. I also think the series of problems you need to address are a little bit different. Now, I think one of the secret pieces of Cursor has been that the work of an individual IC or individual contributor developer, and maybe even the work that someone does at home on the weekend using the tool, is actually fundamentally not that different from the work that they're doing in the workplace. And because of that, it meant that some of the things we had to bridge were a lot of these administrative things, security functionality, working in a large enterprise setting. A lot of the core functionality was actually pretty similar. What we learned as we went out and started to serve a lot of these companies was that the type of problems people were working on were a little bit different. For example, if you're using it at home or on the weekend or for personal development projects, oftentimes you're doing a lot more building from scratch. You're starting on a project that's maybe a much smaller repository, and what you're trying to do is mostly the act of creation. And when you go inside of a large enterprise setting, it's often not the case. There are parts of the organization, siphoned off oftentimes, they're doing more of these experimental type projects, maybe trying to create something from scratch. But so much of it is, again, about interacting with the existing code that already lives there. Major refactor projects, for example, are a big use case. How do you move off the mainframe to a more cloud-centric version of your product, go from COBOL to Java or something like this? How do you think about bumping versions or increasing test coverage inside of a repository? How do you think about maybe more incremental pieces of code edits instead of extreme net new code creation? Part of this meant that the code-based context piece was a lot bigger emphasis of the product that we started to build. We wanted to get to this place where we could, again, be best in class at understanding the deep context that exists inside of your code base and make this almost this acceleration or jump off point for you as an organization. And as we start to build more and more of this functionality, the other thing that we realized is we also had to serve these companies differently. Again, it's one thing to give someone a link and say, hey, go share this with your team, and have them share it to 25 or 30 people. One of my favorite examples is one of the earliest customers we worked with. We did this. It was actually our very first enterprise customer. It was a company in the e-commerce space. And at the time, again, the company was about 15 or 16 people. We didn't have a huge, robust enterprise go-to-market team to be able to go do this. But what we did is we went to this org and said, hey, this is going to be one of our very first enterprise deployments. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a link, and we're going to create a Slack channel with you. You have to be okay with the idea that some of the stuff might break, but we want to see how that growth might actually happen. And what we saw is we gave it to 3 senior staff engineers, and we came back a week later and it was 15 engineers. Okay, so starting to grow a good bit. Came back a week later, it was 200 engineers. By the end of the 4th week, it was something like 1,600 engineers that were daily active users on the Cursor platform. Holy cow, okay, this is like a different version of scale than we'd seen before in these 10 or 15 or 20 person teams. And luckily, this was this organization where they're a very tech-forward company. A lot of people had actually already been using it at home. So a lot of that growth and acceleration had come from, within people that already had familiarity with the tool. The learning we had from them is the reason it was able to grow so quickly and without maybe the growing pain that you'd sometimes get in a traditional software company scaling to this many users is this idea of the kind of internal champion. There are all these developers that, again, had been using the tool for so long at home that once they got access to it at work, they're able to come in and in a Slack channel, in a company town hall, in a lunch and learn session, actually serve as the ones that were training and enabling all of the other developers inside of the organization and helping them actually use the tooling along the way. So we learned from that, okay, first off, any company we work with in this big, large-scale type of deployment, we need to go and actually make sure we've identified those people that can help us accelerate the way the product is rolled out. But secondly, we need to think about how we can build this muscle as an organization as well. So if we fast forward maybe 6 months down the road, at that point we'd had approaching hundreds of enterprise customers we'd brought onto the platform. We'd actually built out this team called field engineering internally. And field engineering is this group of technical folks, all with some version of formal computer science training that had been engineers themselves in the past, that would actually go in when we work with a large organization and help them do the rollout. Help them actually think about the things to do to configure and set up the product correctly, the things to do to host training sessions and very specific things to the organization. So one example there is NVIDIA. It's one of our largest customers. They have 20,000 plus engineers that use Cursor every single week inside of their organization. This was a whole different magnitude of how we needed to help enable an organization. Because in that case, you were talking about actually many, many different parts of an organization that were the size of whole other companies working inside of one big umbrella. And a lot of that was also asking the question with a lot of the leadership at that company, what is this actually going to mean for the shape of what your software organization actually becomes over time? How is this actually going to change things? One example we saw with another company was if you see that 6 engineers were in a pod in the past, and now something like 4 engineers can produce the same amount of code as that group, moving that pod size from 6 people to 4 people isn't just a linear increase in code. And that it's like, let's say they're writing the same amount of code. You actually get a bigger gain than that, because what happens is there's actually a big waste that comes from the cost of communication. And really interestingly, as you see these organizations roll the tooling out more and more to maturity, part of it is that you're accelerating the way the code is written and software is built. But part of it is you're also eliminating all the pieces in between. So much of it, if you think about traditional software development life cycles, it's been going from a place of I'm planning what I want to do, and then I'm going to, hand it off to a design group that's going to design it a little bit more, and then I might hand it off to developer. It's actually all that space in between those handoffs. So you're losing context. What if you could actually just accelerate your way to get to that value? Well, the cost or the value that you're gaining is actually, again, much bigger than simply changes around. So this org literally went and they took all of these pods out of 6 to 8 developers and created many more pods, but with less developers in each of the pod, and saw an acceleration in the code that they could end up writing along the way. Now, to the other part of your question, how does that actually get measured, and how do we actually think about the values that's created? I think measuring developer productivity has always been a very challenging topic to think about. One thing that we really like to look at is these type of metrics that are at this intersection of both quantity and quality. At the early on phase of a lot of these AI coding tools becoming popular, what we saw was people just looking at quantity. Wow, it helped me write 2 million lines of code. And I always said, trust me, I can write 2 million lines of code too. I don't know if you want it in your repository though. I think it's a flawed metric to a degree. You want to find out how the quantity of the code that's written is still high quality. One of the metrics we really like to look at is what % of a pull request, or basically code that's pushed upstream into production, was actually originated by Cursor. And to do that, we introduced a couple checkpoints. So checkpoint 1 Cursor, the AI gives you a suggestion. Do you accept or reject it? If you accept it and you continue to work on the project, do you actually commit that code or actually push it upstream into the project? And we like that second checkpoint because it ensures you're not just deleting it 5 minutes later. You're ensuring that someone hopefully reviewed it and actually pushed it upstream, made sure it was high quality code. And what we see, we actually brought in a professor from the University of Chicago to look at all of our aggregated and anonymized enterprise data. And what we found was there's a roughly 39% increase for the average company that uses Cursor in the velocity of their PRs, where that roughly 40% of the code that makes its way into production ends up being originated by Cursor after companies use the tools just for a few months. So I think this is like the order of magnitude type change that we're thinking about right now. And I always think about that's the state of the tools today. I still think we're at this early beginning inflection point in the curve of what it's going to mean for this tooling to become more autonomous and for this tooling to become probably more asynchronous as well, to be able to run longer and longer sessions of the code that it generates, take on meatier and meatier problems for you along the way. Maybe to the final piece of your question, what does this actually mean? I think what we're going to see is an acceleration on both parts of the curve. I think we as a company have always said we want to be the type of the organization where we really focus on raising the ceiling. But I also think what's happening in this space as a byproduct of this is a lowering of the floor. And what I mean by that is that I think this is opening a whole new ability for folks that wouldn't have been able to think about writing software or building applications in the past to be able to do it. In the enterprise setting, this means companies that historically wouldn't have taken on new ambitious projects to actually take advantage of all the context that they have to be able to build these type of projects that maybe just fell just below the line on the priority list that they didn't think they were going to get to be able to. But I also think for independent developers, for folks that have been historically less technical, also as a step function change in their ability to actually be able to create software. And we see this in a lot of the companies we actually work with. One example is we were working with a big transportation technology company, and we knew they had about 5,000 engineers. And we'd rolled out Cursor with them. Over the first 3 months, they'd gotten to about 4,500 engineers or so. When we came back on the 4th month, it was 6,000 people. Okay, that's a little bit odd. We knew they only had 5,000 engineers. What was that? When we went and talked to them, it turned out all of their designers and some of their PMs all started to use Cursor as well.
Wow.
And what they found was that these folks before had to think about designing in a silo. So the engineer would say, hey, by the way, here's the repository we're working in. I just need you to design this thing. And they would go design it, and they'd hand it off to a developer and say, it doesn't meet my technical requirements, all these type of things. Let's go back and do another iteration. What we actually find is now oftentimes how companies will start building is they'll go on a Zoom call or they'll get in person and put Cursor up on a screen, and they'll sit there for 20 minutes and build a prototype. And this is amazing because if you're a designer, you now understand the technical requirements of what you're actually building. You get to contextualize what this looks like. And again, this is an example in a big company, but I think for individuals as well, this is the ability to take your ideas and turn them into reality. And I think that's going to be one of the coolest parts of what this whole movement means for the world.
Great answer.
Thank you.
Next question?
Yeah.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, thank you for giving this chat. I guess like my question is similar to your question in terms of also based off the acceleration and adoption that you were talking about and ramping up with all the developers that you're bringing on board. How do you target those individuals, give them more features and functionality, and also kind of create a product and skate where the puck is going to build out to where we don't really anticipate AI going? Like how do you guys juggle that, and where do you think the field is going as a whole in general? Thank you.
Yeah, I've thought about this question a lot, and it actually takes me back to the origins of Cursor to a degree. It's actually still very surprising to me that GitHub Copilot isn't the one that won this space, or hasn't won this space up to now, right? It means like Microsoft, the king of distribution, the king of bundling, they have a 6-month head start with like near infinite resources, and they go out there and have all of these customers already using GitHub, right? Like so many of the world's largest companies and even individuals use that as their code storage platform. And I think part of it is that, maybe the biggest part of it is that it's just this new era of building companies. And what you need to do is you need to be really comfortable constantly cannibalizing your own product as the space evolves, which is really weird and actually very uncomfortable feeling. Where like we have, I think, probably deleted more features in Cursor than we've added. To a degree, it feels like sometimes. And not actually, right? I mean, there's progression that's happening. But if you look at a screenshot of what Cursor looked like even, or the core functionality that we'd highlighted on our marketing page 18 months ago, 12 months ago, 6 months ago, and today, there's only remnants of what's shown through. And it's a space where the power law is so extreme. And what I mean by that is that when you hit, or when the functionality works, it really works. And the level of adoption is that can take a company from $1 million to 100 million, and this year for us, 100 million to $1 billion of ARR, because there's just such an acceleration and such a draw from the market to do that. It's also meant internally, we've had to be really thoughtful about how we create an internal company product building culture that makes everyone feel really comfortable that, hey, the thing you just worked on for 3 months, sorry, we're going to scrap that. Hey, the way you fundamentally thought about building the core of your product, hey, we're going to scrap that. And so much of this needs to keep happening along the way. I think there's an example of it that's happening actually right now. I think we're sitting at this inflection point right now where I almost view this whole AI coding space on a quadrant. And one of the axes on the quadrant is synchronous to asynchronous, and the other is manual to autonomous. I'll explain that a little bit. Right now, I think all experiences are synchronous and manual. Manual in that you type in what you want. Hey, help me create this API endpoint, click enter. Synchronous in that you watch the code get written in front of you. You're actually like watching it and working with the AI like a colleague. But what we're increasingly seeing as the intelligence of the frontier models progresses further and further is that these models can take on much longer running tasks. So you can do things like, maybe delegate something to a model where it'll go and work on it for right now, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I think increasingly what we're seeing as we're experimenting is we think that's going to get to hours, maybe at some point even days, that an LLM can go run on a task for you that's a much meatier type of project and come back to you with some version of an output. So as we move more and more along that asynchronous spectrum, I think it's going to need new versions of experiences that need to be created there. And then there's also this manual to autonomous spectrum. Right now, again, manually typing in exactly what you want. We're starting to see that move further and further down the autonomous spectrum, where one example is we introduced an API or like an SDK where you could actually take our cloud agent product and call it programmatically. And one example is we worked with this large infrastructure engineering company where anytime an on-call or like support ticket came in, it would automatically call one of these background agents that go run and spider through your code base and try and solve the issue in parallel with an on-call engineer. Okay, so no one was actually triggering that other than, the ticket came in, it was a workflow. How do you get to the place where maybe AI will even be able to tell, it's like a janitorial agent, areas where it should proactively start to do things for you? And I mention this as a turning point because I think as we move more to these asynchronous and autonomous experiences, what we're thinking through at Cursor is how do we really serve as this cockpit in a way where you have the best platform both for these synchronous experiences, for that last 20% where humans are going to continue to be increasingly very involved in how that code is written, edited, pushed, deployed, but also have this great experience where you can send things off to the background. So even the introduction of Composer, which was our own first stab at a model, really leaned into this a little bit, where we said, okay, right now you're in the in-between a little bit. It's this messy middle where you ask an LM to do something and maybe takes 30 seconds, 40 seconds to get back to you, just enough for you to get distracted by a text message or a Slack or something that's coming in. What would it look like to have this really synchronous experience? So pitch with Composer is it's something like 90 to 95% of the frontier intelligence, but at 4x the speed. So it's getting back to you in 10 seconds or something like that, where it's a very synchronous experience for the last mile edits. But also take advantage of these models like the Codex series from OpenAI, for example, where we truly will see people set it off for 15, 20, 25 minutes and increasingly hour-long experiences where it will actually do project for you. Where I think what the future of this will look like is, hey, today I'm going to work on A, B, and C. I'm going to work live on A, and B and C I'm going to come back to a first draft, hopefully, and after lunch or something like that along the way. And that's going to mean totally rethinking part of our product. What even happened in Cursor 2.0, one of the versions of the product we launched, is we introduced something called the agent layout, which is the idea that historically you had a code editor and a sidebar that was an agent pane. And we actually flipped those around. I think the agent's now becoming so important for people. The agent is the main event, and the code is what you happen to inspect, look at, and edit as that last mile delivery. It's like a total rethinking of this whole experience that we built almost all of the product on for the last 2 years. And my guess is we're only going to need to do more and more of that over time as the company scales.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I think those of us who've worked in Cursor or any of these tools extensively have noticed that sometimes it works fantastic, but once we blow out the context window, the tool just starts spitting out garbage. I'm really, really curious because I know Windsurf has code maps. I haven't really seen a ton discussed in terms of like, and I don't know if you can discuss it in depth, but in terms of like what is Cursor doing underneath the hood there in terms of RAG, graph RAG, any of these sort of interesting techniques for managing context?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is increasingly a piece that we've invested in over the last 3 or 4 months, and probably some more work to still be done there. So the way that we think about it, I think there are a couple of ways you can think about context management. So the idea there for those who are less familiar with this is that anytime that you go out and you ask a question to LLM, so again, we use this example, help me create an API endpoint, click enter. When you are sending that prompt to an LLM that's going to come back to you with written code, the first question is what is included in the prompt or in the context window? Like what is actually informing how it answers that question? Is it just giving it that question straight up, like if you typed it into ChatGPT, or is it pulling other pieces? So what these products do, including Cursor, is you have some version of a system prompt or some version of instructions we've given the model to be very specific for the task at hand or the series of tasks you take on inside of Cursor. But the other piece has been thinking about, again, how you understand the code that is inside of there. There are a couple of different ways people have done this. One is a more ephemeral way of processing where you're kind of doing a real-time kind of like grep of the code base to try and pull out these nuggets real time as you ask that question. And the other way is to try and almost like pre-build that context store, which is to kind of create this whole almost work tree in the background or this representation of what your code base looks like. Cursor's always taken the second approach, and now increasingly has included parts of this first piece into the experience to make it much quicker and much more accurate for you along the way. So basically what happens is anytime you pull a file, folder, project into Cursor, what we're doing is running this model of our own, actually, in an embeddings model that's basically taking this large code base that you're working in and kind of condensing it into packets with little instructions connected to the packets on how you actually retrieve it, called vector embeddings. And then what's happening is anytime you ask a question, we are also doing, running this model over to retrieve the correct vectors that include that packet of information. It's basically storing some version of the code within, but like the line number in the file that's inside of it. So you even see it inside of Cursor when you're asking a question. If you kind of click the drop down, you'll see, oh, hey, it pulled index.js lines 7 through 41 because it knew, hey, that was really relevant to the question you're asking here. We want to pull it and actually put it into the context window for you over time. Now, as this happens more and more, the thing that you also want to be able to do is think about how this retrieval or this RAG based approach actually can do that much more quickly inside of very, very large code bases. So we put a lot of work into this embedding model and retrieval version of our own over the last few months to now be able to handle millions of files inside of very large repositories. One of the first parts of the challenge for us is when you go and work with some of these orgs, like some of the very big tech companies that we work with, they might truly have like tens, if not hundreds of gigabytes of code that sit inside of a mono repo, where in order to spider all of it, you have to go on this one platform and figure it all out. But the second piece, and where we've done some of the more recent investment, is thinking about how we also include a semantic search layer on top of it. And this has been this new piece for us that was released, I want to say 6 or 7 weeks ago, where we're including this version that also is much quicker, where instead of looking for an exact match on the vector, it's actually doing more of a fuzzy match, where it's actually looking for related pieces. Because of that, it can be an order of magnitude more efficient in how it pulls that context back for you over time. Now, I still think there's more and more work to be done here, because my assumption of what will happen, the last 2 or 3 years have proven this to be true, is as these models get better and better, the context window also increases. So historically in these models, you've maybe had something like 200,000 tokens or bits of information you could actually pull into the context window. But we've now, over the last 6 months, seen some of these models, think like Google, for example, with DeepMind has done a lot of investment here. You can have 1 million token context window and pull a lot more information into the model. Now, there's a speed trade-off and a cost trade-off with it right now. But I do think over time, there'll be more of a standard that the context window can be bigger and bigger. And what companies like Cursor will focus a lot of their time on, and our time on, will be how do you actually think about efficiently using that token context window, such that when you have a task that's like, hey, make a simple edit, it actually just does that lightning quick and does it without a trade-off on cost or speed. When you ask something like, hey, refactor this multi-file project, it will actually really take advantage of a large context window, hopefully with minimal speed trade-offs, because we've gotten really good at how we're doing retrieval through grep and semantic search and some of these other techniques that we're building on. So for the deep wiki and some of these other pieces, I think there's like some more development, and we have this whole team called the agent quality team internally, whose full-time job is saying, hey, as these models get better and better, how do we build the harness and how do we think about retrieval that's happening around this to deal with increasing complexity in code bases over time?
Just quick follow-up to that is that, so you mentioned obviously the models are getting better, larger context windows, but on the flip side of that, right, what about, has Cursor thought about small language models and a mixture of experts, these sorts of things that we're seeing a lot more performant models like the Quen series do really well?
Totally. Yeah, we definitely have, and it's even fun to experiment with some of these. Like, in Cursor, you can use a lot of these open source type models inside of the product. And even when we thought about Composer, I think this was like a really big piece for us, was actually saying, I kind of think about it as like it's a classic like triangle, and you can pick two of the three. It's like speed, cost, and quality. And forever, everyone's always optimized for like some version of probably like cost and quality, and like maybe a little bit of speed, but that's been less of the priority and focus. And we've definitely been pretty bullish on this idea that in the future, you are going to just have a expectation that the speed is happening in this way. You see it with these players like Cerebras, even Grok, who was acquired by NVIDIA on Christmas Eve. These players that are like building new chip architectures to optimize for speed of, there's TTF, time to first token, TTFT, of like how quickly does it get a response back to you, and then how quickly can it stream the tokens to you. If you've experimented with any of those products or felt that, it's really hard to go back after you felt that type of experience. And to me, it's only a matter of time for us to get there. And what it means for me is that I always think about, even for our product, there's kind of this trade-off question, or almost like, how do you view the space going of, will the cost per token that's served to you go up or down quicker than the consumption of how these tokens are actually consumed over time? And my take on this and the longer term bet is that, as speeds get quicker and quicker, as products like Cursor and even these early applications advance, not new applications come out on the market, there'll just be so much more consumption of tokens that you're going to see a whole new series of use cases over time. So we do a lot of experimentation internally. Part of our vision at Cursor is that it's not going to just be like a core model. It's not just going to be like, hey, here's this LLM that's spitting out stuff inside of the product. It's actually going to be this kind of ensemble or orchestration of models. And you see it today. Cursor Tab's a model of our own, Composer, our embeddings model, historically our apply model of how once code is generated, how we're applying it inside of the code base. We kind of imagine one of the things we're going to focus on, and one of the edges we'll have, is to be able to really focus on the end user experience. And we're this company that wakes up every single day and says, how do we make this product the best in the world for building software and writing code? If you're doing that, it could look like a series of 10 or 15 very specific models for the tasks at hand, where you've said, hey, the trade-off might be different if you're making an edit versus you're generating something net new versus when you're doing a refactor versus reviewing code. For example, you now see with BugBot and review mode inside of the product. And we're very excited for a world where there's an explosion of models that are out there in the industry.
Hey, it's Mike Vanderpool, and I would like to ask you about tech education and how this impacts tech education. That's the space that I play in. So with the history in web development, right, do you need to know vanilla CSS, or are you just fine with Tailwind or Bootstrap, right? It's kind of a common question that we debate. My question here is thinking and looking ahead at the 20% that you talked about and what's left of maybe the job as a software developer, what are the core concepts, core skills that people coming into the space, new people learning and wanting to become software developers, should focus on now and maybe down the road in the future? What does a learning path look like for people just coming into the space who are going to end up using your tool and other tools?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I thought about this a lot. It's like I think about it both in like how we educate people, and then also I'll share a little bit of an anecdote of like how we think about interviewing people at Cursor to become an engineer here, which may be like a little bit of an interesting light into what we're looking for when someone's coming into our organization, when they are people even like fresh out of college sometimes. I think it's this interesting one where I actually think like having good fundamentals has never been more valuable in the whole space. And we'll go and done a few of these talks and different series of conversations with different universities. It's a crazy spectrum out there right now of what different boot camps and schools are thinking about. where you actually see some of these folks totally trying to ban it. Say, hey, this is crazy. Like, you're not going to be able to use this in if we see any of this as AI generated, you're totally going to get kicked out of class or flunk on it or whatever. And then you see these organizations that are doing what I think is the much harder thing to do, but the much better thing to do, which is totally embrace this tooling and say, like, in some ways, it's never been easier to feel that fun acceleration of getting into value. You don't have to sit there for 3 years or 2 years and learn the fundamentals before you actually get to go do the thing in production. What if you're able to jump in and explore along the way? And I think where that goes wrong is if you're doing that without understanding what an LLM is giving back to you. Up to now, I think maybe it's been a little bit less of a issue, but as we get to these longer running asynchronous tasks where it might actually come back and like have worked on a project for 2 hours for you and spit out an entire code base, I think it will be very easy for someone to not understand the fundamentals. I think what's happening for a lot of the best universities that we've talked to and worked with is kind of a rethinking of the curriculum that kind of bifurcates the experience into 2 separate chunks. A theory kind of version of the chunk that is actually like very like pen and paper like type experience of sitting there, really understanding the fundamentals, the pieces that I think need to be there for a foundation, but also taking parts that maybe in the past felt a little bit more rote or maybe a little bit less important and thinking about how those might become automated more and more. And almost in some degree, using a tool like Cursor to be the best like peer programmer tutor that one could actually have along the way. We even see this, one example is inside of organizations that we work with. One of the biggest things that we hear as a value proposition of Cursor is when a new engineer joins a company, their time to productivity is drastically faster than it was in the past. In the past, you'd have to sit there, you'd have to go get coffee with the one guy that understands this architecture from 6 years ago. I'm not joking. I work with some of these financial service companies where like the person that wrote this code on the mainframe, like literally is like not alive anymore. And that was like the person that like had the information for how this is done. I mean, we're talking about legacy code that's out there in the world. Can you actually go in and talk with, this like extreme version of intelligence with an LLM to understand what something looks like, the foundation, get onboarded into the project over time? We see a lot of these type things starting to happen. The specifics of what people should learn, I think still comes from having that like right balance of, again, like building that foundation and then like putting it into practice. And my hope is that a software education gets to a place where before you'd have long periods of like theory and then a little bit of putting it into practice, and that actually there's a lot more of that iteration that's happening along the way where you should never go through something without trying it. And it's going to really reward curiosity is maybe the best way to put it. And that like people who are curious about this stuff and want to understand the why are going to be the people that are able to get the most out of it. So teaching the patterns of how to work with this technology as part of an education, I think will be really important. What we see at Cursor when we onboard people or when we're going through our hiring process is some version of this as well. So a little bit of a unique process for hiring engineers where we'll do some upfront interviews and stuff like that to do a rough assessment of technical skills and understand the past work someone's done. But the most important part of our process is actually an on-site. So every engineer that works at Cursor has spent at least 2 days in person with us before they start working at the company. And this is the final round interview. And what we do is at the beginning of the on-site, sit down with them and say, really excited to have you here. Based on your area of expertise, we're going to actually give you a project. And be honest with you, this is a project that probably takes 2 weeks. You have 36 hours, but like go run after it. And like you can do whatever you want. You can use any tools. You can talk to any people in the office. We're going to set you up for coffee chats. Go around, go figure it out. By the way, it's in like a large, huge, massive mono repo. And the idea there is to actually say, as part of this project, how much progress can someone make? And like, we don't care what tool you're using, what thing you're doing. We are like agnostic to that, but we want to see the output that someone can actually have on this type of project that's there. It's actually been very interesting. Or like several of these people come back and like have done the whole thing. And you're like, holy smokes, okay, this is like crazy era that we're living within. Where even we thought, even with our own tool, this would be a pretty difficult task to get done in this version of time. Now, what we also do during those 2 days there is we do 2 sessions where we actually take them out of the flow a little bit and say, hey, let's literally go to a whiteboard. And we have a couple challenges where we'll actually walk them through kind of more of a theory challenge where we give them some type of hypothetical problem and something we're thinking about and actually ask them to explain how they would approach it and kind of draw it out on a whiteboard. And like we still do care about the fundamentals, and especially for more specialist roles as our organization has grown, increasingly care about versions of subject matter expertise someone will bring to the equation. But early on, I think still to a large degree, so much of it is like, can you just figure it out? Like if you can't figure it out, we're in this area of all these tools, like probably going to be hard for you to, be productive in an organization where the only thing that's constant is change.
Hi, I'm James Beams. I have a question
A
about
little louder, sorry.
James Beams. I have a question about competitors. Can you hear me? So as the hottest startup in the world, you have the biggest bullseye on you. And I want to know what you think about competitors, what you think about moat building, and how much time you spend thinking about what everybody else is doing and how much is running your own race.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I think this is like, I don't think this is like a controversial thing. This is like the most competitive space in all of technology right now. It is a total bloodbath. Someone described it to me as a knife fight inside of a call booth. And I was like, yeah, but pretty much like sounds about right. No, I think that's commensurate with the size of the prize here, right? It's like the ultimate vision for all these companies is figuring out how to automate software. There's like tens of trillions of dollars industry out there. And whoever figures out to do it will be the next, big tech company, next $1 trillion company that's out there in the world. That said, because of it, especially over the last 12 months, I think the competition's increased a ton. Early on, it felt like it was more of like Cursor versus Copilot. And now you see this introduction of all of the big tech companies, Amazon and Google introducing their own products, all of the big AI labs also saying, hey, we're infrastructure providers. Should we also think about playing on the application layer? One stat I like to look at is at the end of last year, there was roughly $400 million of total revenue that all of the AI code gen companies in the space were doing. And if you look at that number today, it's just shy of $5 billion. You saw 10x in the amount of revenue players in the space are generating. And it's hard for me to imagine there's not at least another 10x that will happen over the next 12 to 18 months as well. What does that mean for us building the product? The thing that we've always really tried to do as our edge is focus. And if you think about any of those other companies that I'm talking about, I think the biggest thing that we have against them is the idea that we are an application company and not an infrastructure company. And every single day we wake up and think about just one thing, which is how do we make the user experience amazing to build software? And like everything starts with that question. What that's meant is that we've played this game where we've really bet on distribution and the data flywheels we create from it being a really big part of our moat. So part of it is just like having a 6-month, 9-month advantage and really needing to compound that with extreme speed. Partially how I think we pulled away from Copilot a little bit early on was it's not a space where, maybe in the past you had a serverless, update or something like that gave you 10 more milliseconds of like speed on performance. You roll it out 3 months later, who really cares? Here it's like, there was literally a time where like, when I think this was Sonnet 3.5 from Anthropic came out, you got it in Cursor literally 3 minutes after it came out, and Copilot, you got it the next quarter. It's like that type of step function change that you see with the models and the speeds you see here is a really big differentiator to the end user. So part of it means when this is your only focus as a company, you can be really extreme in how you drop things to just focus on what the big priority is and make sure you're always prioritizing that end user experience. The other fundamental take has been that what we always want to do is get any advantage, get any product piece into the user's hands as quickly as possible. And it might mean features are rough. It might mean the features don't always work out of the gate, but it will mean we can learn from millions of people that are using the tool every day and turn that into our ability to iterate to product market fit on that functionality very quickly. I think some of these other players have bet more in a step function approach where you wait till it's ready and then boom, you go out into the market, and you wait till it's ready and boom, you go out into the market. We've always said, how do you actually connect those curves and take advantage of all the area under the curve along the way vis-a-vis the distribution that you actually want to have? I think some version of it was focus, and that led to a big amount of distribution that you could compound. Some version of it is also coming downstream from, I think, being a nimble company. This is a really big question for us today, which is, if I think about those companies, the big tech companies, right, we're talking all of them have more than 50 or 60,000 employees. Even the AI labs, the two big ones have 6,000 employees and close to 3,500 employees today. Cursor's at about 270 people at the company. At the end of last year, we were roughly 30 people that were at the company. There's something to be said about the agility of the organization that also helps you compound on the back of that speed that you actually have. Now, I also don't think 270 people are enough to take on this whole $1 trillion industry that we're going after. So a really big part that I've spent a lot of my time thinking about today is how do you maintain that agility even as you want to add hundreds, if not thousands of more people to your organization to take advantage of what this really big opportunity actually is in front of us. And so much of this next 12 to 18 months, I think, is going to be about how we really go capture that market. Maybe to answer the question also a little bit more like structurally, I think there are two big bets that we have going on in parallel. One is that we want to turn a lot of this bottoms-up love of Cursor into top-down rollouts of Cursor inside the enterprise setting. So a very big bet that we have is going out and capturing the enterprise market by going to Fortune 1000, Global 2000 type companies and getting them to all standardize their organizations on Cursor, which really builds the ability to have, I think, more of a sticky, long-term, higher margin revenue base that you actually build there, and creates a lot of fuel for reinvestment back into other parts of the product development that you want to have inside of your business. The other piece is thinking about what it means to build back into other parts of the software development lifecycle. So a really big part for us right now, and it's partially why I think it's fundamentally really important to own the graphical interface, and why a lot of the competitors that are out there have taken more of the CLI or terminal-based experience. I think that's great for getting started on projects, but longer term, if we think about this as, again, that cockpit or automating software, we are going to have to go more horizontal. And you've already started to see it where, Cursor Code Editor now also has BugBot, our code review tool. It also has our visual editor that we kind of introduced with the browser mode that you have inside of the product. I think there'll increasingly be more and more plays to think about how we go horizontal. And our bet there is that ultimately organizations are not wanting to have vendor sprawl across the entire ecosystem. They want to bet on a platform that can think about doing all of this, and on top of that, provide them a lot of optionality on models. Where inside of Cursor, you have OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, XAI, all the open source models of our own, where we can really say, we are going to be focused first and foremost on the product experience that you have. And there will be models out there, there'll be advancement on that front. Some of that will be on our end, but fundamentally, this is a product and application company more than not. So a lot of our time is spent about thinking on these questions. I do think we pay a lot of attention to competitors as well. And it is a space where, because of that speed investment, because of the agility investment, if we miss a wave, we can catch up to it very quickly. And that's always the focus. There are a lot of these moments where we will say, drop everything, and we're going to do a 3-week sprint to actually get something out here to make sure we continue to have the best product that end users will love in the space.
Nice. Thank you.
All right, Greg. Sign time.
Hey, hey. So welcome for coming here. I'm Greg Miller. I run Shrink Ray Interactive, sort of a front end. I do user experience type things. But my question for you really is, like, how do you stay healthy, like mentally and physically? I would think the demand of like what is going on, it would really like bring you down, like the competition and all the things that we just talked about here. You coming up from this area out to California, I mean, how do you do it?
Some great parents. Just kidding. They didn't pay. They paid me to say that. They're here. No. Some awesome parents. I think it comes back from two things. One is like, I really believe you have to be excited about what you're doing. And like, I'm definitely the type of person when I work on something, I have like a deep obsession over the thing I'm working on. And it's actually very fun. It's the first type of company I've ever worked on where it truly feels like there's not a ceiling to what can be done. And it's a really special feeling that motivates you, knowing that the upside, should you do this work, could be some of the most influential work, in this decade that will be done in the software space. And that allows you to like push a bunch of things to the side and keep chugging even when things are difficult along the way. Second piece, I think surrounding yourself by awesome people. I feel I've been like super, super lucky, fortunate, and blessed to have the extended founding team at Cursor just be an incredible group of people that also are just awesome at weathering the storm through ups and downs. Like, it's a brutally competitive market. There are great times. There are not great times equally. The highs are very high. The lows are exceptionally low here. And especially as the company's grown, it's felt really cool to spend so much of my time going and finding people far, far better at myself than dealing with a lot of these challenges along the way, to be inside of the organization and really take them on. So try and like totally unplug every now and then as well. Living in San Francisco is a great place for that. You can just go walk in the mountains for a great time with some breathtaking views. But yeah, otherwise I think it really comes back to the people that you're working with and feeling like the type of problem you're working in is something that you can truly obsess over and feel that level of energy and excitement.
Just one follow-up then. So a lot of tech companies try to, your year on Facebook, like, I don't care, right? Your year on YouTube, I don't want to know like what I was doing. But when I got the email from Cursor to say your year, I was like, let's check this out. And I took screen grabs. I mean, I was really, I was like excited that you're coming here. It said that I clicked on tab like over 8,000 times. It said I was in the 47th percentile. I have no idea like what that means exactly. I have no idea. But I really didn't use any other tool besides Cursor for the like kind of work I did. It said I used like 8.1 billion tokens. I mean, how does this compare to like anybody? I have no idea, but I'm excited that you're here. Cursor was a really great product, came around the time that I really needed it. And so I'm just excited. And I just have to say, like, about 2 months ago, I was working on something. I was like, everybody here knows I was here like in the morning, and then maybe the next day I would leave because I just had I had a deliverable. And I remember seeing like Cursor update like twice, like in the same work period. And I was like, what is going on? And these guys are delivering. They're like going to production on things. And I feel like maybe I was the lab rat, like showing them like, this covers something else that I need. And it was like frustrating, but then an update came out and it was like, oh, okay, now it works. And I'm just like, it's exciting that, a company like that is taking chances and, doing deliverables, and just because people are counting on it. It's a tool that a lot of companies like rely on. So anyway, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we don't want to kill that. I think even as the company grows, we've gotten some feedback that maybe 2 or 3 updates a day is a little too much. So we're going to try and do weekly, but we don't want that to kill how quickly we're shipping amazing features. And it's really for everyone here. Like, this is a company where we want to take ideas and make them reality. Like, I always joke sometimes that Cursor is a internal tools company fundamentally. Like, we're building Cursor to build Cursor, better. So this has been like one really big learning for me, and hopefully for some of you as well. Like, if you can be an own user of your product to the extreme degree, it really helps you improve. Like, almost all of these fixes come because someone internally is like, I hate this thing, and it's 8 p.m. and they're like, you know what? I'm just gonna bunker in. I'm gonna grab a coffee, and 1 a.m. I'm gonna ship the thing and go get it out there and make it better. And a lot of it's also talking to big enterprise customers and folks that might have orthogonal use cases to what we're doing. But still, so much of our product roadmap comes from like us being the ultimate users of the product, and even looking at that and saying, if we're using the thing 10, 12, 14 hours a day, how do we think about how our workflows are changing, and zoom out and say, what are the things we need to look around the corner for? Where's the puck going? All of those type of things along the way. So highly encourage doing that. And also, please send feedback our way. You'll see like a lot of our team all over X and Twitter and email and all these type of things. Like, we really do read all of these things and take them into account when we're shaping up what the next release will look like.
All right.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
I think the mic's coming your way here.
Try and run it.
Thank you. More of a comment. I do love the agility that you have, but just kind of the comment you just made is your agility in the company, eating your own dog food. I think it's, our organization adopted Cursor, our whole dev team moved to it in June. And I'm going to tell you the one thing that has made us, I think that culture is transcended into your product to our dev team, where we're agile. I don't have the days where, oh, that's just going to take too long. We're not going to be able to get that. It's like, well, here's the prototype. Can we build this? well, yeah, we already got prototypes. I guess we could probably knock this out. So it is amazing to see how that culture, I've not really seen that before, where the culture and the product actually transcend to the customer itself. So I do appreciate everything you guys are doing at Cursor as well. So thanks for being there as well.
And it's, I will say on this, the thing that we see is there are two mindsets towards how organizations adopt it. Sounds like you're the latter, which is great. There's one camp, which is to say, this is going to accelerate the way code gets written today. And then there's a second camp, which says, this is going to change the way that our development process works. And I do think we're at this moment where we kind of are going to have to shift there. And so many of these big companies that, spend a lot of my time talking with different technology leaders out there, this is so much of the question is, hey, we've seen so much of the stuff like Cursor Tab and some of the chat functionality where it is taking what someone's already doing and just making that quicker. But in this next era, it's also going to be about rethinking things. Like you should start with the prototype. Why are you waiting to do that until 2 weeks into the process? Maybe you should not, if waterfall, methodologies weren't already dead. Like moving to much more fuzzy pieces. Like it's not about having a team where you plan the thing and then you go design the thing and then you go develop the thing. It's like, it's all kind of this like fuzzy piece that's all happening at once inside of the organization. And number one thing that we've seen correlate with organizations getting the most out of this is not just making sure people know how to use the tool, it's the organizational transformation that comes with it. And actually thinking about how do we change the mindset of what it means to think about our internal development process and adapt it to what these tools will enable us to do. So it's great to hear. It sounds like you guys are doing that.
Got one more over here.
Okay. Hi, I brought 2 high schoolers with me today that might not know what they want to do for a career. And I just wondered, AI is definitely part of their vocabulary. They hear it in school. They're probably using it. It's in the news constantly about how it's affecting the job market. Do you have any advice for them if they're not sure what they want to do for a career from what you've learned and what you've seen in your own experience?
Yeah. The biggest thing I would say is follow your curiosity. I think we're in this era where the barrier to entry to almost any field is just like far, far lower than it's been before. I mean, we have like this crazy source of intelligence in front of us, whether that's ChatGPT, whether that's Cursor, whether that's a whole series of domain-specific applications that are out there. I think it's just this really interesting time where going out there and just going down a pathway of self-education is super important. I always love that quote that's like, I don't want like school to get in the way of my education. And that it's like, I maybe embodied that a little too strong. Sorry, mom and dad. But, I really think it's this world we live in right now where the people that are leaning into this technology, the people that are experimenting, the things that are trying it out, really have a pathway to really feel what it's like to do the job. And I felt very confused, I think, on some of the stuff coming out of high school myself. I was just like, I don't know. There's like so many things I want to do. My freshman year of college, I think I took like 7 classes in 6 different departments. And I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna like try a little flavor of all of it. And most of it's just like reading the textbook and stuff. But I think today it's like, wow, you could actually go get into the depths of really understanding what it's like to do some of these things that are out there, and would really encourage you to dive into it and try it all out.
I suppose I have one more question. So my question is just about at scale. What are some of the ways that you differentiate between signal and noise when you're looking at product features, and which ones would be good to lean into in terms of quality versus quantity, and just how do you identify signal versus noise? Yeah. One of the things that we like to do is really use our internal team to understand where something's at. And again, it's maybe downstream a little bit from our ability to dog feed the product, but we'll have this like kind of structure we'll do where inside of our Slack, actually, someone will like share the name of a feature that we've built and then share the green, yellow, and red emoji. And they'll be like, hey, I put this into the dev version of Cursor. Try it out and like drop an emoji in any comments you have in the thread. What we find is actually pretty cool. Is like when more than 50% of people are green or yellow, it probably means we should ship it and like put it out there into the world, which is to say like, I think grabbing a lot of that signal from people who you trust as nodes of taste are really important. I think the best companies, including Cursor, are not just going to go out there and try and like get consensus on certain functionality, especially in this era where you're going to have to cannibalize part of what you've built
it's often like, don't build the faster horse, build the car type thing. A lot of things we have to do are like put the things out there and build a culture where we are like totally okay with failure. Like there have been many of these things we've shipped out there where we've had to unship them. We literally have a channel in our Slack called like unshipped, where like it's like celebrated equally as like the shipped channel and the unshipped channel when you are like deleting something inside of the organization, because we want to create that culture of saying, just try it out. Like we'll try it out internally, be considered. We have a nightly version of Cursor where any of the fanatics who don't want to try it out, you can enable it in your settings where like you'll get this and you'll see like half the stuff will like not be there in the next release. Half the stuff like may break for a period of time because like it is an experimental type thing that is not all the way there. But we find just getting it out into the world and like letting people actually feel the thing instead of theoretically debating it is really important. And I always think of it like ideas are just like very fragile early on, and it's very easy to like kill something that feels like a bad idea. And when I think about some of the stuff that's worked most successfully at the company, it's because somebody has like gone out and totally just like bucked the authority and not worked on their real work for like 3 days in a corner and shipped the thing. And people were like, holy shit, that's amazing. Like literally the Cursor agent, which initially was called Composer. Composer is now the name of our model, so it's a little bit confusing. But the agent window inside of Cursor was originally called Composer. The first iteration of Composer was shipped from a Friday to a Sunday, like 3 days by one engineer at the company who just like wanted to experiment with this like as a prototype and thought like, hey, this is amazing. And everyone was more on the chat-centric approach, and we thought the technology wasn't there. But like the piece that is the number one most used functionality in Cursor started as like one engineer for 3 days. And I think that's super inspiring to say like, it's all about just experimenting and trying these things. It's not like some complex, huge thing. And to get it to production and make it ultimately useful, then it was this 6-month journey of actually solidifying the feature. But the piece that made someone feel the magic was a 3-day sprint. And I think that's pretty incredible.
Someone else? Got one more?
Yeah.
So not really a question, more of just kind of a statement, kind of sharing my experience with Cursor, because I think I can echo a lot of ideas and things people have said. It's really interesting that you mentioned early on, you saw a lot of growth as like the person that had it on their personal card and then got their company to use it, because that's literally what I did. And like my colleague Joe and I use Cursor all the time at work. We work at Satellytics, a local company, but just like that spirit of like inventiveness and the curiosity, we spoke a little bit earlier, like I'm always hyping up Cursor to everyone because I never talk about like efficiency or like the X and Y's or the numbers. I'm just like, it lets you follow your dreams and your curiosity. Like I can you can't trust what the LLM says, but if it's making me a script, I can run the script and see the outputs. If the outputs are right, then it's right. So like, then if I get that little baseline, then I'm like, okay, what if, the script now saves a report file and I can see how long each step took or how much memory each step in my script took. There's just all these different ideas and things you can just throw in there, and it's just so powerful. And also, like you mentioned, seeing it cross over in different departments, like project managers using it and like marketing using it. And we also see the same thing, and it's just like so empowering for a lot of different people. So yeah, like I said, not really a question, but more of a thank you for the product. But yeah, and it's great.
Got to get you on our payroll or something. Testimonial. Thank you. I appreciate it. Awesome. Maybe time for one more.
Anyone else? Got one more. Who's got one more? There we go.
Okay, so we had the educational technology person, Michael. We had our high school teacher. We work with students. My wife and I, we run Cool Cat Science. We work with students that are like 10 years old, 10, 11, 12. And I was a software engineer, so I worked in the trenches for 20 years. But when I'm trying to convince students, and they've got a lot more options than just tech. They've got all kinds of options. When I'm trying to convince students and their parents that coding and robotics is something that's worth the effort, and the objection comes up, well, now a machine can do the work of a programmer. Am I sending them on a fool's errand?
I don't think so. No. I think if you look at the data, it will actually show that there's an increase in jobs here. Now, interestingly, I think the distribution of those jobs may be different than in the past. I think there's some of these organizations where they've maybe grown to tens, and literally some of these organizations with hundreds of thousands of engineers, where they might think about not needing that same population of engineers to do all this work. But I still think that the area of what software can do out in the world is just so abundant. I almost think about it like this. I think it will actually change the economics or like the incentive of what it means for the space. And here's how I think about it. In the past, if you wanted to work on an idea, you needed to probably go out and raise some like bootstrapped or institutional capital to actually be able to work on the idea. And the risk reward ratio of this, I mean, this is like Silicon Valley, economics, was that really venture capitalists would invest in an idea if they thought it could return something like $1 billion. Because what they would do is they would invest in 25, and it's so risky that they knew that one would work out. So in order to make up for the losses of 24 companies, they needed one to have such a big return that it paid for all of the rest of the investments that they put in there. Now, I think what this meant was it actually warped the ideas that people would work on. You'd only shoot for these ideas where you felt like the market cap you were working on was, tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. But that is actually different from all of the problems that exist out there in the world. There are all these ideas out there in the world that might be, kind of like mid-cap ideas, I'll call them. These markets that are like, could certainly be $10 million of revenue or $100 million of revenue, even if they could never get to $1 billion of revenue, or even a couple $1 million of revenue. And I think what this will happen is it will change some of the economic structure of people being able to work on ideas where they can get to value much, much quicker in bootstrapped and independent ways with, perhaps a different capital financing structure or without capital financing that they need in the past. I think you even see this on social media today. You'll see people go in and like create a bootstrap product in 2 weeks in a tool like Cursor and actually put it out there and get their first revenue on the back of the product very quickly along the way. And I think this will mean is, like, again, there'll probably be some version of redistribution of where labor and where developers are concentrated, but that there's just so much untapped territory for software that is actually out there in the world for people to be able to go build and capitalize on the back of. And even look back to past eras. I think if you look at the Industrial Revolution, you even looked at the early, like 90s, it did replace some jobs, but it created an explosion of a new type of job. It used to be, being a computer scientist literally meant like manually computing, like on a big machine, right? And there were just like not a lot of people doing this. Think about today, there's like 40 million software developers in the world. Crazy. If you go back in the 90s and think about there being something like, hundreds or thousands of people that were like manual computers, that were actually out there. And I think similarly, it might change the scope of the work. It might change the type of problems people are working on, but it's going to unlock this whole new set of problems that we have to go out and capitalize. And I think any era of big technological transformation you've seen in the past, you've seen this over and over. Like some version of this labor will change, but the explosion of jobs that will come from it is in a completely new domain than it had previously been in the past.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So who's?
Incredible. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and spending some of your holiday with me here. And thank you so much to the Tech Talk as well for hosting me. Really appreciate it. And happy holidays, everybody. Thank you so much. Appreciate you hosting me. It's great. I love it. Thank you. Okay. Awesome. Cool.
Sorry, I got clammy hands. I'm nervous.
Awesome.
I was walking around.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you coming by. Yeah.
It's like I feel it.